This is an open letter to the students of Madani High School in Leicester. I would like you to ask yourselves a question. Am I being deceived? I recently saw you discussing evolution with your science teacher and Richard Dawkins on the documentary School Menace. I heard what is known as an argument from ignorance. This doesn't mean that you are an ignorant person. It just means that your conclusion is based on your personal lack of an answer.
Evolution is that human evolved from apes and stuff, but if there are still apes here, then how did human evolve from apes?
This is the commonest question I ever get.
An argument from ignorance works like this. I don't know X, therefore evolution must be wrong. If you personally don't know the answer to a question, it doesn't mean that you automatically know a different answer is true. Apart from your conclusion being based on an argument from ignorance, there are also at least two problems with this question. Firstly, it is structured to make you think that humans cannot possibly have evolved from something else if that something else is still around. When you heard the word apes, you probably instantly pictured something like a gorilla and thought, gorillas still exist, so how could they have been naturally selected? Humans are still apes. Humans plus all other apes, chimpanzees, orangutans and so on, all share a common ape-like ancestor. If you wanted to group the ancestors of these species, you might call them ancient apes or ape-like ancestors. The evolutionary argument can then be phrased as all modern apes evolved from ancient apes, or more clearly as humans evolved from ape-like ancestors. The second problem with this question is that after reading a confusing question, it encourages you to think that the argument for evolution is also confused and must therefore be false, when in fact this is not really an argument made by the scientific theory of evolution at all. For example, if someone were to ask, how can the Quran be true if it says that man was made out of clay, then water, then dust, then congealed blood? Most people will think that the question is challenging a ridiculous claim, and therefore the claim must be rubbish. However, with your knowledge on the subject, you would probably know instantly that some of these verses describe the natural reproductive process of humans, and some describe the one-off creation of special individuals such as Adam. It's important to ensure that the question you are being presented with is an accurate argument made by the claimant and not a misrepresentation carefully crafted to make you reach a specific conclusion. I suspect that instead of teaching you the facts of evolution, what your science teacher actually does is to give you a false representation due to her own misunderstandings on the subject. And then she poses a series of questions to her students which highlight everything she doesn't understand about the subject.
We really come from chimpanzees.
Leading you all to the same conclusion as hers, that it must be a load of rubbish because it makes no sense.
Her question is, why are there still apes?
This is probably because she was taught about evolution in exactly the same way she's teaching it to you. She was taught how to misunderstand it. This is not education. Your teacher clearly doesn't understand the subject at all. What really worried me though is that it would appear you're being taught Quran miracles.
Stuff like the shape of the earth, about the mountains, how they secure the earth.
And how in the sea the two waters, they don't mix, the salty water and the drinking water, so it's pure for us to drink.
You are probably presented with one explanation of what the verses mean, told that science had not discovered these facts until recently, and then asked, so how did an illiterate man know this 1400 years ago? In answering, I do not know, you are led then to conclude, God must have told him, which is an example of an argument from ignorance. Here are the facts about those verses you may not have known. The miracle claim states that the Arabic word used is daha, which means to smooth out. It comes from a root word, dahu, which means to spread out. The claim also states that other words also rooted from dahu are used to describe a place where an ostrich lays its egg, and that means the Earth is egg-shaped. Someone had previously not only worked out the shape of the Earth, but also determined its circumference. Look up Eratosthenes. The actual word used in the Quran means to smooth out, not sphere-like or anything similar. The root word means to spread out, suggesting a flat earth. The related word used is a place an ostrich lays its eggs, and not the egg itself. Even if it did mean the egg itself, an ostrich egg is more like an ovoid, not a geoid, and bears no resemblance to the shape of the earth. The miracle claim here is essentially stating that Allah created earthquakes, but then decided to stop the earth shaking by putting mountains on fault lines. Mountains form where tectonic plates overlap. Some material gets pushed down into the earth, and some of it is pushed up to form the mountains. This is the paper which contains the information used in the claim. However, some tectonic plates move more in parallel than in opposition, and so do not form mountains at all, and yet they still produce large earthquakes. So the claimant is saying that instead of just stopping earthquakes outright, an all-powerful being was only able to fix the problem on some types of fault line, only in some parts of the mountain ranges, and even then the best he could do was only to reduce the shaking by up to 50%, rather than stopping it completely. This claim is really an underestimation of the powers of an omnipotent being who wanted to stop something from happening. When you mix salt and fresh water, a density barrier makes them maintain separation. I could explain how a Greek named Aristotle knew this about 1,000 years before Muhammad, but all I really need to tell you is that this is merely a repetition of the creation story of Genesis. The Hebrew word used for expanse is rakia, which literally translated means firmament or barrier. According to Genesis, the earth was originally all water. God created a firmament and used it to lift up some of the water to become the sky, which is where your fresh water comes from. The water beneath the firmament he called the seas, which is where the salt water is. Or, rephrased, God put a barrier between the two waters, one sweet and one salty, so that they do not mix. Absolutely anyone at the time with even the most basic knowledge of the Jewish creation story could have made the same statement. In fairness, most of your teachers probably aren't deliberately deceiving you. Your science teacher seems at face value to be a genuinely nice person, but they are misinforming you. They have been taught the same illogical approach that they are now teaching you, and are probably unaware of what they're doing wrong. Someone somewhere higher up in your education, however, certainly is deceiving you. Someone who decided you needed to be taught these Quran miracles would have been well aware of the explanations I have just given to you, but chose not to present you with them. So, I'm sending you this open letter in the hope that you realise you should not believe something just because someone in authority tells you it is so, but instead you should ask, how do you know? And hopefully so that you can spot when someone is asking you a question with a hidden false premise, or one which has been asked in such a way as to deliberately confuse you. Ultimately, I'd also like you to accept that nobody has all of the answers. It's better to accept you don't have an answer than to hold on to an answer for which there is no evidence, just because you'd like it to be true. I'd like to believe that I'm not a short, fat and bald bloke, but no matter how much I want that to be true, the facts seem to suggest otherwise. If you would like to break the cycle of being taught how to misunderstand before you pass it on to others, then you need to read as much as you can on any subjects which confuse you, such as evolution. And remember, there are a lot of people who will willfully or unknowingly give you false information. Trust nobody, not even me.